Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome founding partner, Daily FinTech Advisors, Bernard Loon.
Thank you very much and welcome to this session, which is entitled Everything You Wanted to Know About FinTech Hubs But Were Afraid to Ask. So I'll just mention that, make sure you're at the right session, but also please do ask. You've got all of the right people here in the room to ask, and this is designed to be a useful session. If you work for banks and you think, should I use FinTech hubs? Should I invest in FinTech hubs? This is where you learn about it and where you can ask questions of FinTech hubs that we brought here from 8 different places around the world. So it's a great opportunity to ask the right questions. Before I introduce the 8 FinTech hubs, and they're really who you've come to see here, in an early iteration of this, we called it the Battle of FinTech Hubs. Sounded a very good sort of media play, but we changed it to what banks want from FinTech hubs. Because actually, it is not a battle. If you talk to all of these guys here, they cooperate with each other quite often, quite frequently, and comparative advantage between countries is economics 101. So it's not one FinTech hub to rule us all. There's many different FinTech hubs here, and with that, I'd like to start by introducing the 8 different FinTech hubs. And I'm going to start all the way in Australia, where Alex Scandura, who's the CEO of Stone & Chalk, has flown in all the way from Sydney to come and see us. And then from Singapore, we've actually got 2 people from Singapore. We've got Sopnendu Mohantu, who is the Chief FinTech Officer of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And I've just got to say one thing, that's the first regulator I've ever heard with that job title, so congratulations and thank you. And also from Singapore, we got Marcus Knerk, who's the co-founder and global CEO of Startup Bootcamp FinTech from Singapore. And from Switzerland, which is also where I come from, John Hucker is the founder of Swiss FinTech from Zurich in Switzerland. And from Luxembourg, we have Nicolas Macal, who's the CEO of Luxembourg for Finance. And from Brussels, we have Wim de Waal, who's the CEO of Explore. Welcome. And from London, we have Lawrence Wintermeyer, who's the CEO of Innovate Finance. And coming remotely from New York, we have Maria Gotch, who is the CEO of Partnership Fund for New York City, for New York. So technology is helping us. Thank you, Maria, for coming there. And from Silicon Valley, from the West Coast, we've got Mike Segal, who is the partner of Alliance SV, coming all the way from Silicon Valley. So without much further ado, I'd like to hand back to Hamilton, our game show host here.
Great. So we're going to, even though this isn't a competition, much like Bernard said, we're going to have it a little bit like a game show. We're going to give each of our panelists here 5 minutes to tell you about their FinTech hub, what their goals are, what the work that they're doing, and what they need from banks. And so you'll get a lot of different perspectives and also probably hear some very consistent themes across all of our panelists here. As we go through this, you're going to see a score come up for these FinTech hubs. And Bernard, if I could bring you right back up, and if you guys can look in the back here, you're going to see, there's our key, just so you can understand. Bernard's group has done a little bit of indexing each of these hubs based on a couple of factors, and maybe you could give us a brief overview.
So there's one factor, which is global financial center. Fairly standard ranking of the financial center. I think London comes up number 1, New York comes up number 2. There's another one which is done by the World Bank called Doing Business, which is about how easy it is to do business in a country, how long it takes to set up a company, how much it costs, that sort of thing. More difficult to rank, but there's something called the Global Innovation Index, which is how innovative is that center. So what we did is just sort of normalize some scores and put up some numbers by putting them all together as a way of doing a level set. But it really, that is all it is. You're here to hear what it's really like to work in these FinTech hubs on the ground and hear the color of it. But this is just a kind of level set.
Great. Thank you. So we're going to start with Mike over here, and maybe if we could go ahead and bring up Mike's stats, because there's some other stats here, and these were stats that were given to us by the FinTech hubs, and they rated themselves on a scale of 1 to 3 in terms of regulation, inbound, customers, the experts, and the culture in their space. So they're going to talk a little bit about this. So what we're going to do is we're going to give each of our participants 5 minutes. When their 5 minutes is up, they're going to hear a game show bell. And then what we're going to ask them to do is to pick their top trump card. So what is that one factor? There's 5 there. There's a couple other factors that truly is a distinguishing characteristic of their hub. So they'll give a little bit about what they think might set them apart or certainly is a distinguishing characteristic. So here we go. We're going to start with Mike. Mike, we're putting 5 minutes on the clock. Go.
Thank you. So thank you all for having me here. My name is Mike Siegel. I am a 7-time entrepreneur. I tell you that by way of introducing my perspective. And I am a founding member of what's called Alliance SV, which is essentially a group of entrepreneurs, product developers, and consultants who believe that any corporation needs to have innovation as part of their DNA, or they basically won't be around in 20 years or so. And we believe that any responsible innovation strategy should take advantage of what Silicon Valley has to offer. The expertise, the density, the concentration that's there. Doesn't mean you need to be there, it means you should take advantage of it. What Alliance does is it delivers consulting services, software, educational programs, primarily to help institutions learn how to innovate more effectively, learn how to innovate like startups. Okay, so I wanted to start by giving you my definition of a FinTech hub, which essentially is a geographic concentration of people, of institutions that are interested in innovation in financial services. And there are really 4 characteristics that I see that are important, which are that there is often some kind of government support, some kind of economic development support. There's often some kind of regulatory support that makes it a little bit easier to innovate. There is proximity to bank executives and employees who can actually get their hands dirty doing innovation. And there's proximity to bank customers, right? And the fundamental value of a FinTech hub to a bank is that it creates a sandbox environment where they can reduce the costs and risks of experimentation, either in making their organization more innovative or actually bringing new products and services to market. So when you think about myself, my colleagues, and other hubs, that's the fundamental value I believe that we can bring to banks. Okay. Now, a little bit about Silicon Valley as a place that you should pay attention to. Fundamentally, we're not a FinTech hub. We're the center of the universe for things startup. We have more startups, investors, unicorns, right? Companies that have gotten to billions of dollars in only a couple of years, and even corporate innovation outposts than pretty much the rest of the world combined. What I would say is the defining characteristic of that environment, though, is that we have generational expertise in bringing new products and services to market rapidly, right? And because it's generational, each new generation of entrepreneurs, of investors, et cetera, are vastly more efficient at that process than the one that came before. Witness that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, Uber didn't exist, and now it's the biggest transportation company in the world, right? So that is our fundamental expertise. And the other thing that we are is sharers. Anyone who wants to come to the Valley and tap our expertise and interact with the people in the Valley will be welcome. If they come to try and shut down the Valley, they'll be disrupted. If they come and want to learn and interact, they'll be welcome, all the way from the top to the bottom of most organizations, which is the final thing to note that we've got in Silicon Valley that most other places don't, which is we have the actual leadership of the technology companies that in some fashion or another financial institutions will want to partner with. So you may have an Asian CEO of Google here, but for a global or corporate relationship, you're going to be talking to the people in Silicon Valley. All right. That's the summary of what I've got. I'm going to turn over my extra minute to my colleagues and my trump card.
Great. So you beat the clock. Fantastic. Congratulations. So yeah, what is your trump card? What is that one characteristic you think really distinguishes Silicon Valley?
So I'm picking my wild card, and my word is density. We've got more density of innovators and innovation practices than anywhere else. So come learn from us, please.
Great. Thank you. Round of applause for Mike. All right, so in Silicon Valley right now, it's about 10 at night yesterday. For our guests from New York, it's 1 in the morning, so just take that into account here. So Maria, thank you. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, fantastic. All right. Thank you for joining us so early in the morning, a bright start to the day. We're going to put 5 minutes on the clock for you, Maria. Your stats are now on the screen for all of us to see. Your time starts now.
Great. And greetings, everybody, from New York City. If there was ever any doubt that New York City is a city that does not sleep, I am evidence that it does not. So glad to be with you all. I thought Mike did a great job of laying out what an ecosystem is. So I'm going to get right into some points about New York and New York's current FinTech ecosystem. As background, I run the Partnership Fund for New York City, which is a private fund with a civic mission to create jobs in New York. It's backed by the corporate sector of New York City, so many of the big banks are our investors. The money they put up for our fund, though, is focused on job creation and not financial returns. And specifically with FinTech, we set up and operate with Accenture the FinTech Innovation Lab, which is about connecting startups to large banks, and more on that in a second. So there are 5 things that I think people should pay attention to for New York and what makes us a very interesting FinTech hub. The first is that we are a world financial capital. So we have the largest concentration of financial services firms in the US and one of the largest in the world. And what that means is we have a deep pool of customers that can be, deep pool of banks that can be customers or partners for FinTech companies. And we also have very extensive domain expertise. So we know how to run exchanges, deal with regulators, et cetera, all the things that as you scale as a FinTech company are very important for you. The second thing that New York has is that we are a robust tech sector. We are granted not as large as Silicon Valley, but we have pretty rapidly become the second largest tech sector in the United States in terms of dollars invested. And we're a leader in digital and consumer engagement. And right now, those are some key themes and expertise that's in demand and that is transforming financial services. So a third reason to pay attention to New York is that we are more than tech. We have a lot going on in media, arts and culture, fashion, healthcare, retail, and science. So you go to meetings, cocktail parties, out with your friends, you get more than just tech, or more than just FinTech even. And I think why this is important is it allows us to attract top talent and that wants diversity for themselves and their families. And also innovation feeds off diversity of skills and ideas. And I think the soup that New York has with that range of skills and variety of people feeds into our tech sector. The fourth sort of key thing to focus on for New York is that we have many of those key elements of a successful ecosystem that Mike talked about. We have a first generation of FinTech entrepreneurs. So they are angel investors, advisors, they're starting new companies themselves. A lot of these companies were started in the late 90s and were trading platforms and data. And you're seeing those people sort of coming back this next go around. We have venture dollars. Our venture investments in FinTech are growing twice as fast as other places in the country. And we have a lot of talent with domain expertise, as I mentioned before. And then lastly, supportive infrastructure. We, as I said, launched the FinTech Innovation Lab back in 2010. And in the last 2 years, we've been joined by at least 4 other incubators and accelerators. We've had a local city and state government, which has been very supportive of entrepreneurship with tax benefits, et cetera. So kind of all these factors, I think, pull together to make New York one of the leading FinTech sectors in the city, in the country. What trumps all of them, and I think is a theme that we emphasize in the FinTech Lab, and I think as you think about FinTech is a key factor is the proximity to customers. And a lot of FinTech companies will end up being either acquired or partner with a large financial services firm, tapping into the expertise to learn to know how to move money, to deal with the regulators, et cetera, are all key things which are very important for FinTech companies, and we have them in spades in New York City.
Fantastic, thank you. You too beat the clock. I know you guys are dying to hear the bell, I know it. Maybe we'll hear it at some point. That's not a challenge to you guys, by the way. So Maria, thank you very much. Stay tuned because we're going to do a Q&A and I'm sure there might be some questions for you. Thank you. All right, round of applause. Hopefully that came through over the Skype. Okay, Lawrence, Wintermeyer, you are next. We got 5 minutes on the clock. You may go.
Thank you. Innovate Finance is an independent members association that was born out of the number 10, the Prime Minister's Policy Office, a bit more than a year ago, to focus on building a fintech ecosystem, or really being a single point of access for the fintech community, which I think, given we're in technically a bull market for fintech, was pretty prescient. So we started with 50 founding members, startups, what we call unicorns now, the 1B valuations, and most of the the UK global banks. And we've extended the membership from 50 to about 140 members right now. And across that continuum of seed startups to institutions, in that lies what I like to call the secret sauce of what it is we do, which really isn't so secret. We put innovators together with institutional leaders, regulators, venture capital, and the professional supply ecosystem. And it's not always comfortable, but we get them speaking practically about how they're going to work together and accelerate fintech. And that's pretty important for us in the UK, because the one thing that I have noticed in speaking to all of my colleagues from around the world, and and again, I'm really quite focused on listening to Singapore because I think they've got a very aligned view. But in the UK and Europe, we've taken a very collaborative approach with regulations. So the Bank of England and its approach to digital currencies, the financial regulator, which is the FCA, runs Project Innovate and gives guidance to startups. It has its own sandbox. We've got a new payment systems regulator, and part of our job really as a cheerleader is to help with projects we have, like an open bank API, which will deliver just that, an API to allow more people to participate in the payment system. So it's probably what I think is one of the most progressive regulatory schemes that I've seen, and I think in the history of regulation. And so, other than deregulation, I'm always interested to collect case studies of how effective regulation right sizing can work. So please come talk to me about that. So really, we're more of a cheerleader or a sort of a coach. I call it lobby with a small L. And who do we lobby? Well, we lobby the West Coast venture capital firms and the institutional ones, because they fuel London. We lobby New York and London institutions because they're pretty integrated, and most of them are our members. We lobby certainly the government, and we lobby anyone that's interested in participating in an open, inclusive environment and accelerating fintech. So why do banks need fintech hubs? Quickly, and banks tell me this. So most of your colleagues have told me this, but banks don't naturally disruptively innovate, particularly at an origination level. Banks have balance sheets and risk controls and P&Ls, and they're very much focused on delivering those. So there isn't a behavioral motivation to be disruptive. Disruptors in this case, and if you look at the capital inflows in fintech, they're broadly in the payments and in the peer-to-peer space. That's not my bell, by the way. And so they're actually they're disrupting in relatively frictionless, frictionless as in regulatory-free environments right now. So institutions actually need to access that level of innovation, and quite often innovators need banks for scaling, for capital, for partnerships. So the two in my own world actually coexist sometimes a bit more comfortably than people think. So I think the last thing that I would say about the ecosystem that we've developed is we're really aggressive about putting numbers behind it. So we're really focused on three big measures. One's attracting a large amount of capital, and we're very secular about where that comes from, but it is predominantly West Coast based. The second is seeing more momentum plays. We've got 2 unicorns and 2 junior unicorns. Silicon Valley and FinTech, I think, has 20-something. So we'd like to see more. But lastly, we're also focused on creating in excess of 100,000 jobs in FinTech for the UK. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. You are unflappable, Lawrence. So let's see.
Hey, wait, right. Well, I have to actually add something about this. We actually polled our members. Out of 140 members, we got a 20% sample rate on a Snap survey for these scores. So I don't know where all of your other scores have come from, but these aren't mine. These are how our members rated us, which I was pretty happy with. But the number one, the number one thing that members think distinguish London is the expertise, and that is FinTech expertise. That's not particularly just FS expertise. So
that's great, thank you. So, and just as a point of reference, this was a scale of 1 to 3, like I said, 1 low, 3 high. So you can rate the scores there as well.
13.5 out of 15.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so we're going to go to Brussels. We're moving across the globe. Wim, you are up next. We're going to put 5 minutes on the clock, a true 5 minutes, and you can start now.
Thank you. Good afternoon. You probably, if you look at these stats, you probably think, oh my God, these guys should stick to chocolates and beer. But things can change, and the best, I think, example I can give is after our win last night over Israel, Belgium, who used to be mediocre at football, became #1 in the FIFA ranking. And we are going to be very happy to beat the Germans next year in the French European finals. So, joking aside, we actually look at Brussels not as Brussels as the local hub, but our initiative Explore focuses on mainland Europe, the Eurozone. We believe that we do not need to compete and cannot compete with financial centers like London, Singapore, or New York. Our goal is to actually help entrepreneurs scale within Europe mainland and Eurozone, which is a fragmented and complicated market, and where we believe we have some expertise in helping people connecting to the financial services market. That's Jürgen Engels, who is actually in the audience, who founded Clear2Pay and sold it last year to FIS, and myself, who used to be the CEO of an incubator called iMinds, which was voted in the top 25 of university accelerators. We combine our expertise because we believe there's a window of opportunity to help in this financial services sector technology companies in the Eurozone. That's our focus, linking them up with banks and financial institutions. We draw on expertise that is in Brussels within a niche. It's not a big financial center, but in the area of market infrastructures, API-based back offices. We are actually close to organizations such as SWIFT, Euroclear, and others, and we have a B2B community of expertise in Brussels that can be put to use for that. We focus on three things right now. We investment, growth fund, SmartFin, that's a 75 million euro fund, and new initiatives coming, focusing on funding companies that want to scale in Europe. Secondly, our hub. The hub is actually a 4,000 square meter facility close to the airport in Brussels where we want to co-locate starting companies, but specifically scale-ups and corporate initiatives to actually tie that community together. And thirdly, we've also launched an initiative called The Glue, which is actually a technology platform that integrates back office systems of banks, the silo-based systems that they're faced with, the legacy that they have as a burden to compete with the new upcoming technology vendors that are invading their space from Silicon Valley, to integrate that silo-based architecture with the new API-driven technology, FinTech technology companies that are emerging and that need to integrate with their platforms if they want to be successful. That's our focus right now. We are basically launching the initiative. We are also, as I said, have a European focus. What I think I would like to add to that is to the billion-dollar question, do banks need those FinTech hubs, those kind of initiatives? I personally believe we're actually in a as you can tell, I'm old enough to have lived through the bubble and the bursting of the bubble in 2000. I think we're there again to a certain extent. There's just too much corporate incubators and unicorns and all those things around. McKinsey partner yesterday told me, when we start thinking about setting up a venture fund, it starts to shorten on FinTech companies. So we're not there yet, but there might be we might be there. But on the other hand, there is definitely there is a more of a strategic change going on in our industry. Banks, financial services companies have to change, transform into platform vendors, and that's why they need initiatives like that. I'm glad ING today announced that their FinTech Village Accelerator will actually be part of our ecosystem in Brussels, and we hope many other partners will follow. We can bring together those players across mainland Europe and the Eurozone, which FinTech is a global market, but of which that continental Europe is still a complicated but important component. We're also close to the European Commission. The regulators play an important role in this. You know, Google and Facebook can do pretty much what they want, but if the European Commission speaks, they listen. So I think we have something to offer, although we're coming from behind. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Wim. And so show us your card.
Well, I took the same one because people are most important. The subject matter expertise is more specific than what's going on in London. But what we want to be is specifically, you know, a hub that's led by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. It takes a special kind of breed like Jürgen to sell your company for 400 million and then not go lie on the beach again immediately, but start again with something else. I went through the pain of starting up US operations in Europe for a startup, US startup twice. And I believe we can add, together with our team and all the people involved, some subject matter expertise to companies who want to come to Brussels or Europe.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, we move over to Luxembourg and Nicholas. Nicholas, we're putting your 5 minutes on the clock. You may begin.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be on this panel. Luxembourg for Finance is a public-private partnership created by the Luxembourg financial industry and the government in Luxembourg to help develop even further the Luxembourg Financial Center, which today is in the European Union, number 3, obviously after London, after Frankfurt, occasionally even before Frankfurt, depends on the addition of the Global Financial Center Index. Our flagship in Luxembourg is the investment fund industry, where by assets under management, we are number 1 in Europe, with more than 4,000 funds being administered and distributed out of Luxembourg globally. We host 140 international banks and are a premier wealth management center. Luxembourg Stock Exchange is a global leader in listing of international securities. And last but certainly not least, Luxembourg is a major EU payment hub with players like PayPal, Amazon Payments, Rakuten, and many others operating out of Luxembourg. Why, to your question, why do banks need fintech hubs like Luxembourg? Well, what we are seeing is that many of these financial institutions in Luxembourg are not waiting for innovation to trickle down from the top, that is, from the headquarters. Indeed, what is happening more and more is that these players are looking around in Luxembourg to find solutions locally, to partner with local operators so that they can feed relevant solutions into their respective group. In Luxembourg, they find a very complete and attractive startup environment, starting with public initiatives, 2 of which need to be mentioned. The first is Technoport, a state-of-the-art incubator, and Lux Innovation, which is an agency that serves as a one-stop shop to help startups in the tech area to set up their business and launch their solutions. Private initiatives also abound in Luxembourg. There is, for instance, an independent incubator slash think tank on startups, which is New UCO. And then there are a number of operators that within their respective groups are really setting standards, such as PwC's Accelerator, KPMG's Cube, the KPMG Hub for Entrepreneurship. Others are following, will be following shortly. One more example that is really remarkable is BNP's Luxembourg Future Lab, which is actually an interesting example of cooperation between a major bank and startups. Funding, of course, is also available next to a very rewarding IP regime in Luxembourg and private funding from venture capital and the Business Angels Network. The Luxembourg government has several sources of funding. First of all, grants. Second, a soon-to-be up-and-running seed fund. And then, more importantly, Luxembourg's government has, together with the European Investment Fund, which, by the way, is conveniently headquartered in Luxembourg, set up the Luxembourg Future Fund to invest into innovative companies, European companies, by the way. Regulation plays an enormously important role in this partnership, and Luxembourg's authorities have a track record of openness to innovation, of accessibility, of responsiveness. Being member of the European Union, obviously our regulator is issuing not licenses only to operate in Luxembourg, that would be defeating the purpose, but to operate within the European Union's market of 500 million consumers. That is, for instance, why many non-European companies come to Luxembourg to headquarter and operate out of Luxembourg into the other European markets. Not later than last week, SnapSwap, a US-based startup, was given a license as the first virtual currencies operator as a European payment institution. Finally, research, the Luxembourg University and the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology are partnering with the local financial industry to develop real solutions that meet the needs of these players. Obviously, infrastructure is very important. Luxembourg has a state-of-the-art ICT infrastructure that allows for the lowest latency possible. Thank you.
All right. Perfectly timed. All right, Nicholas, let's see your trump card.
Well, Luxembourg being small but attractive, many other countries' startups come to Luxembourg where they find a complete financial ecosystem, a complete FinTech ecosystem on a human scale.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, moving through Europe, we come to Switzerland and John Hucker. John, you've got 5 minutes. You may begin.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity and thanks everybody for the interest. I'm a banker by background and wanted to indulge in a bit of storytelling because I think it really helps contextualize what's going on in Switzerland. And one of the themes for me that's really coming up time and time again is the dichotomy of threats and opportunities. And I think that's very true of Switzerland. So the story for me starts about 6 years ago. I resigned from my job at one of the two big Swiss banks. I was working in my hometown of Toronto. It was in the middle of the aftermath of the financial crisis, and they were being bailed out by the national government and looked to be in pretty bad shape. The opportunity for me at the same time was to go off and study in the UK for an MBA, which great experience. Very quickly, I was headed on my way to Switzerland to work with the other major Swiss bank. And I was really the only guy in my class who thought anything about going to Switzerland to work in a financial institution. And largely that was because of the end of an era. Not only did Switzerland face the impact of the financial crisis, which I think we all did, there was a unique point in history where our traditional value proposition was starting to erode, and that was around banking secrecy. And as an outsider who was new to the city, I started to get thrown into some really quite interesting projects. And if I were to characterize those, I would say it was a combination of regulatory and cost cutting. And stepping back for a moment and just looking at that simply, to me it was being asked to do more with less. And right there it was becoming clear to me that innovation was going to start to play a role. Moreover, with the idea of the value proposition being eroded, the whole topic of innovation started to seem like something that might be a point to hang on. And if you think about, again, what clients were doing and the way the world was shifting, again, it was clear that digitization and innovation was becoming a major theme. And when I contrasted my experience in London and what I was seeing in the Zurich Financial Center and the Swiss Financial Center, to me it was quite frankly a bit of a vacuum. Everybody was used to a very successful, a very clear value proposition and way of doing business. The management and the whole industry had shaped around that. And now they were really very reactively adapting to things. So we had this view that there was potential and huge potential and opportunity around Switzerland. So a few of us started to connect the dots, and that's what manifested itself as FinTech Meetup Zurich, which was very much a lean startup and a way of testing the waters. And over the course of a year, it became clear that we really did have something powerful there. So last spring, we started to form a board of directors to help figure out what we were going to do next. And that took actually stakeholders from all different sides of the ecosystem, and also uniquely from the two poles of the Swiss Financial Center in Geneva and Zurich, which are a little subtly different. What we decided to do was create a hub for fintech in Switzerland, much like you see in London and other cities. It had to be neutral, it's not for profit, and really what we aimed to do was to connect the individual people from different sides of the equation. So that's now taking shape, and in our first few months we've launched a survey to help ground all of the thoughts about what's going on and where the opportunities are. We've hosted Switzerland's first major world-class fintech startup event, which was a great success and had the regulator involved as well. A few weeks later, they announced plans to open up doors and create a path for fintech startups. And then we've also now created the first directory and started to really shed light on an ecosystem that wasn't well understood. So actually, we're just getting started, and there's a lot more to come. But something that I think is interesting to note is what makes Switzerland unique. I think the real strength of Switzerland is its uniqueness. It's one of the leading financial centers globally, but it's different. It's not a global hub like London, New York, or Hong Kong, but it ranks just slightly below them because it's the world wealth management hub. It's also huge for insurance and a couple of other businesses around the alternative investment space, which make it quite unique. You have an incredible culture of innovation in Switzerland, maybe not yet in finance, but Switzerland is often ranked as the top innovation nation globally. You have a huge pool of wealth available in Switzerland. You also have a tremendous stability in terms of finance, regulation, and the legal framework there. Last but not least, I can say it's also a wonderful place to live, and it attracts people for all sorts of global companies from around Europe and around the world. So a really solid base. What that base has allowed Switzerland, I think, to create a real value proposition around for fintech are 5 pillars. I think the traditional one is international banking and wealth management. The other kind of anchor point is the insurance business. One of the ones that you might have heard of in the news is also crypto and blockchain, and how there's been a real community shaped around that. In fact, you've seen Zappo, a major Silicon Valley firm that's relocated some of its business to Switzerland for those reasons I've mentioned. Then actually turning a bit on its head banking secrecy, we have data security, which Switzerland again has a lot of the right things to be a real hub for. And last but not least, I think a bit of a wild card is financial inclusion and social finance. And really there's 3 points to that. It's about the world organizations, the history of philanthropy and wealth that flows through Switzerland, and also the need for a wealthy country to look to emerging markets for the sources of innovation. Oh, I'm out of time, but if you'll indulge me, I think the point about fintech hubs is that innovation happens outside of the banks. There's a war for talent, and how do you access those people? And as we're highlighting here today, different hubs offer different values to the banks. So that would be the end point for me.
All right, great. John, thank you. Which card would you like to share? Oh, you got two.
I want to use 2. I mean, I wanted to say financial stability, which is the bedrock of the financial industry. But for me, I think it's really that dichotomy of having a threat and the need to pivot and figure out how we can be relevant in the future. That's the wild card that's going to make Switzerland so successful.
Great, thank you. All right, now a long flight, and now we're home. Here we are in Singapore. We've got Marcus and Sapnindu. They're going to share their 5 minutes here. We're going to put it on the clock. You guys may begin.
Well, ni hao and welcome to Singapore. It's great to see so many people coming from the world now to Singapore, and we can share what's going on in this part of the world. So I'm running Startup Bootcamp FinTech, which is an accelerator for FinTech startups. So I'm a startup guy, as you can tell, not wearing a suit, like Mike.
And I'm a regulator.
Yeah, you are a regulator, exactly. So I'm going to share the first half, what I experienced the last 10 months. I moved from London to Singapore. So I have 5 lessons I learned from being here in the last 10 months, I think, where FinTech really kicked off the ground. And we had a big demo day, for example, at the end of July of the program. We had 650 people coming to demo day, the biggest FinTech event ever in Asia. So things are happening here. So 5 lessons from my side. The first lesson is, and I don't have many stats, there's only one number I'm going to say, which is going to be a very important number. The first important lesson I learned, proximity to a surrounding area, emerging markets, where you have high friction in financial services. There are 2 billion, that's a number, 2 billion people in the hinterland of Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, where you have actually pain points of customers and businesses that need innovation. Where FinTech in the West is more or less always innovation, or it's adding value. There's real pain points here in Southeast Asia where FinTech is solving real problems. Being a startup guy, that's what we appreciate. So you have a lot of B2B happening in Singapore as a finance hub, and more B2C happening around these areas. And I think Singapore is a perfect hub for going in and out to this. Second lesson, you have a lot of business expertise. Singapore is an island, so it's quite small, it's granted. But you go across the street and you can meet people who are very open to talk about all the knowledge. The business expertise is so close, so dense here in Singapore. It's just a few square miles. And that's amazing for startups, for bankers, for anyone that wants to be involved in fintech. So it's a hub for business expertise. Third lesson, research and talent. You have amazing universities, MUS, NUS, SMU, and NTU with really good labs. So blockchain is not just a buzzword. They actually do research on blockchain here to find out how they can serve the financial industry. You have institutes like SKBI, which is doing a lot of leadership programs for executives to help the banking infrastructure to think forward. Fourth lesson, fintech is not just a silo here. It's always about banking, banking, banking. Fintech is going to take beyond this. It goes into IoT, it goes into big data, healthcare, insurance. I think where Singapore thinks always ahead, 20 years normally, fintech is a good underlayer for more that's going to come. And it's a very good testing ground, given the size, to take fintech into other areas, not just banking. And then fifth lesson, the government. That's also the reason why Mohanty is next to me here, works very closely with the startups and the community in general. It's been a very good experience the last 10 months to work with the MAS, with the IDA, with the industry to really think how we can shape this together. And on this note, I hand over to you.
Thanks, Marcus. Just to paint this picture in a circle, if you dissect the Singapore ecosystem, the core to the ecosystem is the financial center, which is fourth globally. And we have 700 plus banks, plus 2,000 plus FIs, all located within 30 minutes drive from the city center. Quite a deep, rich source of SMEs located here. And surrounding them, we have a remarkable public-private partnership, which makes the ease of doing business quite easy. In fact, World Bank ranked us as #1. And surrounding that, we have what Marcus spoke about, a marketplace which holds 30% of world population, 2 billion people. In 3 to 4 hours plane ride from Changi, you are there. Quite a large marketplace to tap into. And lastly, if you surround that with our infotech capability, in fact, 2015 World Economic Forum rated Singapore in the Network Readiness Index as #1, which essentially means our ability to tap into the IT capability for competitiveness is quite high. And sitting on over a strong regulation, which I represent, and very progressive, we provide a safe and sound regulation for this ecosystem to develop. And lastly, we don't believe on a hub. We believe on a network of hubs. And I think together, we should be able to help this ecosystem to grow and help the banks to succeed.
The government.
Thank you.
We had two people, as we expected. All right. So guys, I think, Marcus, you're going to show the card for both of you.
Yes, so I've got basically two cards. Obviously, I've got this card, proximity to customers who will try something new, the 2 billion people, and I've got a human card, which is the regulator sitting next to me.
All right.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we've gone all the way around the globe, and we've landed in Australia and Sydney. So Alex, we're going to put your 5 minutes up, and you may begin.
Cool. Well, thank you. Really nice to hear what everyone's thoughts are. By way of quick background, like Marcus, I also returned from the UK to come back to Australia, which is obviously where I'm from. I spent the last 3 years there at Barclays, where my team essentially created and launched their innovation hub in East London and Manchester, and the accelerator program with Techstars. So a bit of a flavour in terms of what's happening in Australia. Well, Australia has got the world's 4th largest pool of super funds and pension funds in the world, which for a population of about 23 million represents quite a significant opportunity. It's also been rated #1 in terms of Sydney as far as creative talent. We've been rated 6th in the world in terms of innovation talent. So there's that combined with the fact that our banking sector is quite digitally advanced when we think about digital and mobile, together with our really mature and advanced superannuation and wealth management business. And of course, insurance is the great topic that everyone's talking about right now, so far as perhaps the next big real interest area so far as fintech goes. provides quite an exciting opportunity and mix of ingredients for really fueling a very strong fintech ecosystem. The other key part that's historically been the big draw card of Australia is it's an extremely livable place in the global context. I think we've got 2 or 3 cities in the top 10 on a regular basis. So when you think about the fact that fintech traditionally attracts founders that are between 5 to 10 years older than a lot of other sectors, given that the requirement really that you have to have around knowledge, expertise, and experience around the financial services sector, a lot of those people have families. So when you combine that with the access to talent, the advanced nature of our industries, together with the livability of Australia as a destination, it provides quite a nice platform for any form of innovation or startup ecosystem. By way of background in terms of Stone & Chalk, I just wanted to give you a flavour for some really key messages. Number one, Stone & Chalk is an independent and not-for-profit fintech innovation hub. Why that's important is because we don't take any equity in the startups that we support and have no rights over the IP that they're creating. Our whole focus and reason for existence is on building the fintech ecosystem across Australia, then of course with collaborating with fintech hubs like you have here today across the globe. There's some key aspects that set us apart from a lot of other hubs that are around the world. And number one is the scale of what we have. We only launched in August of this year. We had applications exceeding 500 people and representative of about 150 startups. We've only selected 50 high potential startups so far that are representative of about 150 full-time residents within Stone & Chalk. We've got great diversity in terms of proposition area. We've got startups that are working in insurance, wearables, connected car, mobile payments, data and predictive analytics, P2P lending, equity crowdfunding, loyalty and bridging online and offline, as well as a great diversity in startups in terms of life stage. We've got several that are 2 to 3 people teams, very much in terms of pre-commercial and pre-launch. And we also have several startups that are between 15 to 20 employees, already revenue generating and cash flow positive. So quite a great diverse mix. One of the key things that sets us apart is our model and focus around collaboration. We're effectively looking to solve 2 problems. The first problem is how do you help startups scale? So our mission's around helping accelerate at scale, and that's in key partnership with large organisations from within and without Australia. Our model, while supported by the state government, is we are founded by 25 large Australian and international companies that come from banking, superannuation, insurance, technology, and communications. And our core part of our focus is to run collaboration programs where we help provide access to large organisations that recognise the limitations that they have around innovation, resource in terms of people, and also cost, and give access to them in terms of the latest fintech innovation that's emerging. But also importantly, we provide access and opportunity to those fintech startups to partner with large organisations and leverage their geographical footprint, customer base, technology, and domain expertise, and together see how we can generate a model where both win in a way that is not currently possible when they work alone. So that's a core part of Stone & Chalk and our focus, and it's a real pleasure that we're here to partner and collaborate with fintech hubs around the world. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Alex. That's great. So what's your trump card for Australia?
Collaboration, baby.
Yeah, all right, fantastic. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left here, and we definitely want to make sure we end on time so all of you can get up to the Startup Challenge upstairs. And I would say, but we do have time for a question or two. If you have a question, just more information about one of these hubs, I'd ask you to follow up with them directly. They'll be here, or maybe you can follow up through email. But if you have a question around why banks need fintech hubs in general, let's start there. Any questions for all of these as a community of hubs that you'd like to know more about? Anybody want to start with a question? Who is it? Right over here. Adiza.
Hi, Adiza.
You're a plant. You're from Innovative.
I am not a plant.
All right.
I am from London. And actually, a number of these hubs have come to London to learn from what we're doing. And I think that my question to the audience is how will the global knowledge of how to create a fintech hub be shared properly, because actually it's really important to have that collaborative approach, but some stakeholders say they're very collaborative, but they're actually not. So how do we encourage the banking sector to also actually do the doing as well as the talking about being collaborative?
So you picked collaboration, Alex, not to put you on the spot. Any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, I'll just take one example in terms of, let's pick out some banks, right? So what a lot of organizations don't realize is just how important it is to take a kind of startup first, pay it forward approach to engaging with startups. Engaging with startups is very, very different to engaging with any other third parties that any organization is used to dealing with, where it's much more a matter of negotiating, who's going to win what point. So in terms of collaboration, I would say that it's absolutely crucial to think through how as an organization you become startup ready. And that's everything from how you rethink and re-engineer your procurement process, who and how startups engage with your organization, and what is the right approach in terms of timelines. Because if your approach is that it takes 9 months to close a deal with a startup, then very quickly it's going to become known that you're not the right organization to be dealing with because you're burning their cash. So ultimately, I would recommend thinking through how you can become, really the leader in the class in terms of attractive for startups to work with. Because if you can crack that nut, then you will start to attract the best startups because you're easy to work with.
Fantastic. Mohanty, you look like you had something to say. Quick response or follow-up?
I think the reality is that what we see in Singapore, most of our banks actually are part of the process. In fact, we are promoting what we call a sandbox regulation, which allows banks to come into that process and work with the fintech companies and experiment within their framework. Plus, we are seeing a lot of our banks opening innovation labs in Singapore. As a government, we are supporting that process and ensuring the FIs are leveraging this process rather than what you call disruptor versus challengers versus the incumbent.
Great, thank you. All right, any other questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we got in the back, yeah?
Just a quick question on Luxembourg. How did that number go to 146? Everyone else is in there. Nobody more than 28.
Sharp-eyed person.
Yes.
It was a.
Can I thank this gentleman?
Yeah, thank you very
Yes,
much.
yeah.
I'd like to say it was put up there as a deliberate mistake to see if somebody was paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. There was a bit of a transcription.
It was a complete and utter error.
Yeah, yes. They're number one.
It's mixed up with Brussels.
Yeah.
If I'm a global bank and a global tech company or a global advisor, how do I triage between the hubs, or do I have to subscribe to all of them?
Let's go to this side. Mike, come over there. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, we've heard from each of the hubs that there are certain sectors in the financial services industry where they have more customers, more expertise, more talent, these kinds of things. I think you have to look at each part of your organization and figure out which hubs you can engage with that will most support that particular line of business, right? Again, the hub is designed as a place where you can innovate more effectively, but there's no reason to innovate on the retail side of banking in Luxembourg, right? But there are lots of things to be innovating with, given the expertise and talent and financing that's there. So that's when we advise folks about which hubs to engage with, we tell them to look at their business, look at the expertise that any given hub or set of hubs has, and then go talk and see if their vision matches yours.
Great. Maria, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, just to keep you awake. Any thoughts on that, about how can the banks and others navigate the global fintech ecosystem, or just any other thoughts from you on the conversation?
So there's a lot of patience to spend time with. So I think you have to pick one or two the most sense, because unless you've got a huge team, you can have one person in each location. A lot of the banks that we work with look at innovation globally. And so spend time in a more focused way, picking hubs. And I guess the other point I would add on to what the gentleman from Australia said was that there are a lot of institutions out there that have innovation hubs and innovation groups and innovation labs. Everybody seems to have flavor of the month. And I guess I would echo and say that if you do not have people from your legal and procurement department along with the innovation people, you're probably just going to a lot of cocktail parties. And you're able to bring back that innovation internal. Because it's really about a sort of system change that has to happen. So it's really as much about that as it is making sure you've got somebody on the ground in all the different FinTech hubs.
Great. Thank you so much. So we're out of time here for this. I do want, Bernard, maybe some closing thoughts from you. But if you, again, I would love, we could have an hour session with each of these guys up here. And so please engage them afterwards to find out more about their hubs or multiple hubs. And thank you guys. So Bernard, a couple of thoughts from you before we close it down.
Thank you. Two thoughts. One is that there's a wild card called culture, and it's very hard to describe. But one term that was used, which was pay it forward, I think describes a culture of an innovation culture, and it's a strange thing to do. Pay it forward just says, sure, I'll give you. I'm not asking. It's not a trade. I'm not asking anything in return. And when you see innovation cultures, that's what happens. And it's very contrary to how we've grown up doing business, which is trading. I do this for you, you do this for me. Pay it forward, it just says, I give. And of course, if you keep on giving to the same person, he never gives anything back, you kind of say, oh, well, maybe I won't in the future. But that's one thing. That culture is a very important thing. And the other thing is stay light on your feet, because it changes very fast. 6 months ago in Switzerland, I don't think anybody would have said, Crypto Valley, crypto expertise in Zug. That's very, very new. So don't say, this is the way the world is, and set that in concrete. Kind of look at what's happening now. And another example would be from London, where you'd have said, well, yeah, great startups in London, but you've got to go to New York City for big IPOs. We just had WorldPay do an IPO in London, about $4 billion value. So again, wouldn't have said that even a few weeks ago, but now it's true. So stay light on your feet and assume it's going to change. Thank you.
Great, thanks, and pay it forward. All right, so I'm going to say everybody, then we'll thank them all at once. So first of all, Mike, Maria in New York, Lawrence, Vim, Nicholas, John, we have Marcus and Mohanty and Alex, as well as Bernard. Thank you all very much for this. This was fantastic. Round of applause. All right, so before you head out, a couple of things. Please rate this session. We want to know if you find these types of sessions valuable. If you give it a 5, we will do more like this. So please give it a 5 if you like it. Next is the Startup Challenge. Please, all of you, go upstairs. It's conference room 2. They need your eyes. They need your votes. Your vote means money to these startups, so please go up there. We'll start back here tomorrow morning. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.